Let's go. Welcome to 2 on 1 podcast, the Powerchair Football Podcast. Delighted to be joined again by my co-host, Mr. Ryan Sipple, for a review of the Championship Weekend 1 in the PTC Therapeutics National League. And over to you, Ryan, to introduce our third guest.
Yeah, as Alex just mentioned, this episode will focus on recapping, reviewing and discussing the action from Gameweek 1 of the Championship, where we'll talk about significant moments, results, individual performances and much more. And to help us with that very task, we're delighted to be joined by Owen Swift, an experienced coach in the Premiership with Teesside PFC. Owen has a strong link to Teesside still, one of 3 new sides competing in this season's Championship. Owen, you were present this weekend to witness the action as well as support us with commentary. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, fantastic weekend overall. The teams and the quality that everyone prevailed, and individual quality was fantastic throughout the league. It's going to be a tough one to call, I think, at the end of the season, who goes up and who goes down and everything in between. But overall, I'm like massive step up from what the Championship was even like 4 or 5 years ago to what it is now. It's going to be really hard to see who does what this season.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a brilliant weekend of football, and I think you touched on it. The quality has grown substantially in the last 2, 3, 4 years, and we're seeing that gap between the Premiership and Championship continue to decrease. And the weekend's football, it was a testament to that. It was so competitive, and the format of this podcast will look at the current standings in the PTC Therapeutics Championship, maybe give a little bit of a recap and a review of each team's individual performances and results, and maybe cast our eyes forward to the season ahead. So finishing the weekend in first position, we had Greenbank PFC. They were absolutely superb, and I'd love to get your thoughts on their team. A fairly new looking team with regards to how they approach and start a game. The recent acquisition of Luke Kelly, who I think officially transferred from Brighton and Hove Albion, but he adds tremendous quality to their team. A team that was brilliant last season will no doubt, certainly after Game Week 1, have very strong title aspirations. Give me your thoughts on Greenbank, Owen.
Yeah, Greenbank were probably, the top of the league, and they were the best quality side that was at the weekend. I know it's a bit unfair to base it off one weekend, but the amount of quality, like you said, that Luke brought to the squad, he's got an experienced head on him. He's played with the best. He's won the best. So for him to come into the Championship is fantastic for the league, and it's fantastic for Greenbank even more so, because it means that they've got a very, very, very good player on their team, and fair play to Luke for not thinking that the Championship's below him. It's a lot of, I think it is often on players' minds that once a team gets relegated or the surplus to requirements in the Premiership, that they won't go to the Championship because they think it's maybe a little bit of a lower league. But now it's getting better. It hopefully will draw the attention of better quality players. But yeah, so Greenbank were fantastic. Liam stood out for me. I know he's in the equaliser chair, and he was fantastic for me. I thought they're quite a young team as well, so for me that is vitally important. You want the young players coming through, to gain the experience, and you want to see them at National League, not just sitting in Regional League and sort of wait until they're a little bit older. You want to see them at national level, and there's no reason why they can't win the league for me.
I think you touched on a perfect point with regards to Luke dropping down a division to kind of ensure that game time. I believe he is Manchester based, so geographically it makes a lot more sense than that of maybe a Brighton Hove Albion of last season. But dropping down a division, as we've said, a few years ago would have been seen as a significant step in the wrong direction. But if we take the examples of a player like Regan Kemp, who left AFC Bournemouth Warriors, a established Premiership side at the time, to drop down to Nomad Knights and then see what he had done with that team, players are braver to making them decisions now if it means that they'll get consistent quality game times and competitive minutes as well, which we will reference throughout this podcast, because the Championship's quality from top to bottom was exceptional.
I think you also picked up a very interesting point about his experience. So I watched Luke when he was on the pitch, and when he's in that central role, the level of control he has over the team in terms of directing players where he wants them, telling them when to move, when to hold, when to rotate, what genuinely directing the play with instructions. I think that's the biggest added dimension he brings to the team. Obviously his skills as a Powerchair player, but that organisational quality that he brings, I don't often see in every team. But when you do get a player like that, they're often stand out, and they're often the difference between how the team plays when they're on the pitch and when they're not. I'd say the comparison would be two that jump into my mind is John Boulding at Aspire, who very much dictates the play when he's in the middle, both vocally with physical directions and the way he plays. And then also when Matt was at Brighton and Matt Francis was playing at Brighton, he was very much the same in terms of controlling the game, the play, and dictating the shape of the team, and therefore how they played. And I thought Luke brought that organisation to Greenbank at the weekend.
Yes, I agree with every point you've just made, Alex. And on that, he was voted as the Championship Player of the Weekend. So massive credit to him for that, making that immediate impact within Greenbank's side. And I think everyone was pretty blown away with their performances, and have them as very strong title challengers at this very early stage of the season. Pair that with the quality and depth that they have. Ellie Curran, a very competent, qualified defensive player for Greenbank. But the addition of Luke Kelly has, certainly this weekend, I think you referenced it, Owen, is Liam Ashton and Jacob Butch-Platt, who are two of the most talented young players in the country. Jacob's 12 years old, and I regard him right up there with the country's best in and around that age category. And they're thriving from that service in the central position now. We look at the goal standings. Liam Ashton come away with 6 goals across Gameweek One, currently the top goal scorer. Jacob Butch-Platt with 5, Luke Kelly with 4. So they're starting to find their form in front of goal, where they may have stagnated in some of the games last season. So they've shifted now. The momentum has completely changed, and I think I said it on commentary for one of the games across the weekend. The Greenbank starting 4 is one of the most exciting, one of the most talented that I've seen at that level, with Ellie Curran, Luke Kelly, Liam Ashton and Jacob Butch-Platt. So really excited to see what they can do across the 5 weekends, considering how good they were in Game Week 1. Looking down at the table, we now move on to Middlesbrough, and really interested to hear your points on Middlesbrough prior to game week 1 kicking off, I had them down as my favourites to secure the championship crown across the 23-24 season. I think last year they were superb, and it's worth noting that they are a very young side with regards to average age, but they have that quality and that experience from Kath McNichol and Carolyn Bean really helping them. Alex, give me your thoughts on Middlesbrough if and when you watch them across game week 1.
I think they had an interesting weekend. They moved some of their players around a fair bit at different points to potentially experiment with different formations and player shapes, knowing that they might have some player availability issues throughout the season. And consequently, they didn't always look as fluid, but they always looked in control. They look very solid. They've got a lot of good organisational knowledge within the team. So it's not just within a player's specific position, but as a team, they know what they're trying to do from an organisational point of view, and so look defensively solid. I think some of the attacking fluidity will come with new players in new positions in time. So I won't be too worried about their player availability issues, but they're working through them at the moment.
Yeah, on that point, I think the player availability across the 5 weekends will play a considerable factor with regards to where they finish the standings. I think that we know that Umar Hanif and Sam Mackay will be the ones that potentially may miss out on a number of games. I think both being PF1s, it could play a factor into how they shape up the team. One player I want to give full credit for, who I just was absolutely blown away with across game week 1, was James Found. James Found operated as Middlesbrough's goalkeeper. I think he played every minute of football available to him. A new position for him, a player that would typically occupy central or wide areas for Middlesbrough last season, not only ensured that defensive stability for them across their 4 fixtures, also contributed in attack, scoring 3 consecutive penalties. So they have the confidence that he will keep clean sheets at the back, and he can score up top. Owen, what was your thoughts on James across the weekend?
James was fantastic. He's a young lad, and like you say, he's adapted, and he's shown that ability to adapt from either playing a central role, which at that age is a very, very difficult role to be playing. I think he's at the age where he's just maturing as well, so he's taking his football a lot more serious, which is fantastic because it's what Borough need. Borough they've got a fantastic coach in Carolyn. When I was there, you look up to what she installs in the squad. So yeah, I think James was pivotal, and to score 3 penalties is a quality in itself, because nowadays penalties aren't easy to score with the new rules of keepers being sideways on. But yeah, James was great. Middlesbrough, like you said, they're a young squad, and the average age is very, very young. So, but that doesn't stop the quality that they can produce. And it was good to see them swap it around a little bit at the weekend and still succeed. It didn't matter really who was on the pitch. It just showed that now their squad depth is probably as best as it's been in recent years for a little while, and the quality that they prevail in that squad depth is really, really good at the minute. So hopefully if players are unavailable throughout the season, then they'll still be able to be competitive and see where they end up.
Yeah, I think, Alex, you've both mentioned it now, that they didn't necessarily have that fluidity in some of the games this this weekend. There was a lot of experimentation, certainly with regards to the central player. I think across Saturday's games where they played Teesside Steel and Norwich, they were rotating constantly between Umar Hanif and Carl Forster, both very different players. I would have said Carl Forster's distribution was superb. He was great in picking out the wide players. At that time, I think it was Sam Mackay and Kath McNichol. When Umar came on, he was more defensive minded and more wanted to engage in kind of the physical sides of Powerchair football a little bit more. But it's throwing players in at the deep end that aren't necessarily comfortable or proficient at this stage within them roles, but there's no better chance to learn it than being thrown into them situations in competitive fixtures. Training can only take you so far. Regional league football, whilst continuing to grow as our National League Premiership and Championship doesn't emulate the National League and the competitiveness of it. But full credit to all of their teams players, because they all contributed to an almost faultless weekend. They started with that close 1-0 win over Teesside Steel, and being a close affiliate of Teesside, we'll talk about that result in a lot more detail, because there was a number of factors that are worth noting, from a red card to a penalty to performances and more. But Teesside Steel were incredibly competitive, I will say that just briefly. Norwich City followed for Middlesbrough, and that was a stalemate, 0-0, and I think it spoke about what Alex was saying. They had control of the game, but they didn't necessarily manage to unlock the defence of Norwich. And then it was a fairly faultless Sunday against two very good quality sides in Muscle Warriors and Leeds Dynamos. They won that one 2-0 and 3-0 respectively. Two teams that will have very strong aspirations of securing automatic promotion and or that third place playoff. So full credit to Middlesbrough. I think they reverted back to their familiar system on Sunday, with Kath McNichol occupying the central role and then rotating them wingers, and we saw that familiarity. And I think I don't want to do them a disservice, but I feel that they probably exceeded most people's expectations last season, finishing where they did and so close to securing promotion. The expectations around them have shifted now, and people want them and expect them to be right in the mix, challenging for the title, if not the automatic promotion. So full credit to them and their coaching setup for a fairly dominant weekend. They impressed a lot of people around the Lee Westwood Sports Centre, and the factor that we've mentioned on a few times now is that the absentees and how they adapt to them players if and when they're unavailable. Now we progress to third place, Teesside Steel, who are, as I mentioned at the top, are one of three new championship sides alongside Villa Rockets Lions and Manchester City PFC. They played 5 games across Gameweek One, winning 3 and losing 2. Before we go into them results in more detail, give me your thoughts, Owen, on Teesside Steel, their performances across Gameweek One, and how does that align with their expectations for the wider season?
Results-wise, definitely. I think the results, especially on the Sunday and the back end of the Saturday, were good. I think we got the goals that Steel maybe deserve and wanted. The quality of football, however, was not what we expected. What Steel expected. Sorry. The quality of football Steel are capable of much better. I think a difficult thing with inexperienced side like Steel is that they haven't got much game experience, so everything that you do in training looks fantastic until you put 4 men behind another ball or 4 people behind behind on the opposition, and it starts to look a little bit different. And I think we what they sort of did is sort of maybe relax a little bit too early, and stoop down to a level that isn't theirs. So I think they need to, in future weekends, possibly up the game a bit, pass the ball around a little bit more, and put the quality that they entail.
Just an interesting point you said there about game experience. I think when we talk about experience, we don't always necessarily explain what we mean, and I'd just like to take a moment to say, when you play in a new environment as a player, or even when you go in as a new team and a coach, there are new stimulus and stimuli everywhere, visually, auditory. There's lots going on. There's other people talking. We've got commentators on the side of the pitch talking. They look up in the balcony. There's cameras. There's additional spectators that they wouldn't normally have. There's new referees that they don't know how they run, where they run, how they operate, how the voice sounds, what they're going to say. So there's a whole world of extra stimulus that comes into a player's field of concentration, if you want. And so that then takes up time, competes for their mental concentration and their ability to focus. And not to say the players aren't focused, it's just that they're still training their brains to filter all that stuff out and not be aware of it and focus on the football and on what's going on. And that's when they can also then apply their football and their training to the match better when they're in that more focused mode. The other thing you mentioned was it was 4 new players behind the ball. Now, in training, you can try and learn principles all you want until you find out that there's a team that will defend differently or attack differently than you're used to in training. You don't know how to apply those principles in that situation. And until you've experienced 3 or 4 of those different types of setups and different attacking styles, different players, that some that will just drive, others that will look to pass as soon as they can. Until you experience all of those different things, and then you can draw on that experience and filter out and make decisions quickly, you are, as you say, inexperienced in that scenario, and that has an effect. And that's what we talk about, or that's what we mean when we talk about experience, is how quickly can your brain filter out the extra stimulus that shouldn't be part of your decision-making process in that environment. And so that's a key sort of factor for new teams, particularly coming into a national league in a venue where there's a second court running next door, over the barrier wall, etc. So I think that's an important point to make as well for Steel and for the other new teams, so City as well, and some of the other sides that probably look like they're new in terms of players set up as much as anything else.
Yeah, but it's also the added pressure. It's National League. It is broadcast on YouTube, so it's the added pressure, which is a good thing to many players. But when it's an inexperienced team, it's a little bit harder because we train on a Monday night, which is not like just over 24 hours after a weekend that I've just watched Steel kick a ball about, and I sit and I watch them on a Monday night and go, where was this 24 hours ago when people, players are wrapping the chair around and hitting the ball at 100 mile an hour. I'm like, well, where was that at the weekend? And their answer is, well, there's less pressure at training. But that's that's what part and parcel comes with it. And I think as a team, the new ones, you look at the league, and as Ryan mentioned, there's 3 new teams, which is a big proportion of the league. It is a big proportion of the league. So for them new players, the added pressure that they haven't had in their life, it's going to be quite hard at the start, especially. But as the weekends get into it, then I'm sure they'll be get a lot used to it. But yeah, like Ryan said, 3 new teams, which is a big proportion of the league, probably the biggest that there ever has been.
And on the topic of them three teams, I will say that I was beyond impressed with all three of them for different and varying reasons. Manchester City, I don't think any of their players, I think one maybe has competed at National League level before, but bar that, a very young side, experiencing all them factors that Alex referenced for the first time. It's a lot to process, it's a lot to take in. For them to come away from Gameweek One with points on the board, they secured a fantastic 2-1 win over Nottingham Forest, which we'll talk about later. Must have been blown away with that. We obviously ran our commentary across the Championship division, and we put out kind of a commentary form where people could submit an expression of interest to support our commentary team, and one of their players, Lucas Veza O'Brien, was talking to me early on in the weekend that Man City came in with the aspiration of scoring a goal across Gameweek One, let alone securing 3 points. We revert back to Teesside Steel, and whilst a number of their players have National League experience, have operated at a very high level, gelling as a unit and consistently performing and securing points is another matter altogether. And to come away with 9 points, sitting third in the division after Gameweek One, irrelevant of their performances and how you felt they should have or could have performed, is really impressive. And I think we've got to delve into the detail a little bit more. Teesside Steel opened with a close 1-0 defeat to Middlesbrough, which they will be really happy with, and we'll get onto the details of that in just a second. Following that, it was a 1-0 defeat to Villa Rockets Lions, who one of the three new teams who impressed thoroughly across Gameweek One. And then, as already been mentioned, faultless performances against Manchester City, Sale United and AFC Bournemouth Warriors. They're their 3 final games. So if that's a Teesside Steel team that aren't quite hitting the heights you know they can, it's really exciting what they can achieve in the season ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Just going back to that Middlesbrough result. Middlesbrough, strong title favourites going into the weekend. It took a red card and resulting penalty to separate it very late on. It could have very easily been 0-0. Do you want to talk about that, Owen? And then I want to pass over to Alex to talk about kind of the red card and the implications of that being awarded.
Yeah, like you said, Steele will be happy with that. Middlesbrough are a tough side. They're a very experienced side. They've, finished, I believe, 4th in the Premiership one time over, couple of years ago. So, and the coach is again a great coach. Carolyn, she has also managed Percy Headley Panthers in the Premiership back in a long time ago, but it's still experience, which is, when you look at what the Steel squad has with Graham Bin coach, he's sort of brand new to it. We only decided sort of towards the end of last season that he'd be the one that takes them to the National League and be coach. So when you look at that and you match the two up, for it to be 0-0 for a good proportion of the match is fantastic. For it to be decided by a penalty is a little bit disappointing, because we'd have liked to have seen how it did spell out. I think Steele would have got tired, but with there only been 5 minutes left of the game, could they have held on? We'll never know. But it was a fantastic match, and Steele, I think we said at the time on commentary, Steele will be the happier of the two out of, even though losing, out of the two teams.
So that red card was given as a result of Oscar Mulgrew leaving the field of play to deny an obvious goal scoring opportunity. Do you want to talk about that in a little bit more detail, Alex?
Yeah, so it's interesting because that's the third red card of the season for that offence across Premiership and Championship. And last season, there were no red cards for that offence at all. In fact, there were no red cards at all. But the interesting bit for me is looking and analysing how that red card came about in each of the situations that we've had. And all the teams involved have some form of system that requires their keeper to leave the box. That doesn't mean to say they play 4 out, as we call it, for if we're referencing 4 out and saying that's the England style. But 4 out in terms of utilising the goalkeeper as a fourth player at some point. And so that means that at some point they often, within games, will find their centre player behind their goalkeeper, because their goalkeeper's come out, they're involved in play, they've ended up being pushed forward as a result of that play, and the centre player's or second pivot or centre pivot, main pivot, has come round behind the goalkeeper to cover and keep the shape of the team. So then when they end up defending, it can be the centre player that's the furthest player back, or they're defending on a break, and the centre player is the one that's scrambling back, and they're further back than the goalkeeper, so they end up diving into the goalkeeper position. And it's often when their goals are scrambling, I think, that this scenario occurs. And players, as we've said, they're so focused on playing on what they're doing, which is to stop the ball. As a centre player, they haven't quite got into that habit yet of not going over that goal line. And so the consequence of the more expansive shape with a goalkeeper that comes out, which is great that we're seeing that football, because that's, we want to develop footballers that can go on to international level. So the more teams that adopt some form of understanding of playing football with 4 players out and about on the pitch and understanding that shape, the better it is for our top level chances. However, one of the consequences, it looks to me, is that players are centre players and centre pivot players are finding themselves as the back player in scramble situations that require them to dive behind the line to block the ball, and aren't in that split second yet aware of this scenario enough to make a different decision. So I think that's where we've ended up with 3 red cards. I might be wrong, but that's my analysis of what I've watched and then gone back and looked at the red cards.
Seeing this as kind of an adaptation of the game and the evolution of our national league, do you see this being a reoccurring theme across the 5 weekends in both the Premiership and Championship?
No, I think most players will listen to this podcast and think, that's happening now. So they will then adapt their play and their training. And I suspect coaches will have seen this as well. And be talking to their players about this as a potential scenario. The other thing is we've also had 2 yellow cards, which resulted in a red card for leaving the field of play to avoid a 2-on-1. And again, that's sometimes because, or I think that's a potential product of the fact that the play is more squeezed now because there are more players out on the pitch. Previously, when goalkeepers sat in the box, and there were 6 on the pitch. Now, depending on where the ball is in play and what's going on, you can have 8, and so the space is a bit tighter. And so, to be able to avoid that 2-on-1, players are using the full width of the pitch a bit more. And so, I think those offences around leaving the pitch and giving away 2-on-1s are getting tighter. But I think that's an evolution for players' thought processes and skills and knowledge. Once they've experienced that scenario for a little while, I think you'll find there's a slight drop-off. We'll still get the odd one, though.
Something to certainly consider and look for across the remaining football we have in the Premiership and Championship. But no, back just to recap on Teesside Steel, a fantastic weekend. Whilst it was the correct decision to award Oscar with the red card, they were really impressive and excited to see what they can do across the remaining weekends. The next weekend, scheduled for the 18th and 19th of November, will be the real test, because they open the weekend against Greenbank, followed by Middlesbrough, Norwich, Leeds Dynamos. I don't think you can get a much tougher 4-game weekend So that's that barometer. And if they can come away from that weekend with 3 points, 4 points, 6 points, or shoot for the stars and maybe achieve even more, that will serve in determining their season, I think, because it's going to come at a time where, and for all those that don't know, we have a fairly large break now between Game Week 1 and Game Week 2, both in the Premiership and Championship, due to the 2023 Fit for Powerchair Football World Cup. So all our National League activity ceases to ensure that competing players can get their chairs to and from, as well as compete at the World Cup competition. But yeah, Game Week 2 for Teesside will be that barometer, and we will assess after to see if they align with that expectation or whether they exceed expectation. Looking down the table, we come to Muscle Warriors, and I think we've had a discussion around the weekend, the three of us, how impressed we were with Muscle Warriors. They've been one of those sides for many years where you just expect them to finish middle of the pack. There's no real, I don't want to seem too harsh, but there's never been a huge expectation for them to challenge the top teams in the division. But for me, that shifted. I had the pleasure of commentating a few of their games across Game Week 1, and I was really impressed. The organisation, the quality, the depth has shifted now, and I have very strong hopes for them ahead of Game Week 1. What are your thoughts, boys?
I was very impressed this Saturday, especially with Muscle. They looked strong. They looked very, very strong. If you'll pardon the pun with the muscle warriors. But yeah, they look good. They started off on Saturday, and after sort of watching them, they were probably one of my favourites to go up. Sunday was a little bit tougher. With Borough beating them and things, but yeah, Muscle look very, very strong. They've got some good experienced players that have played together before a long time ago and reunited, with I think it'll be a good season for them going forward.
They started the weekend with a 2-0 win over Leeds Dynamos, one of those, that being one of the games that I commentated on. And there was a lot of expectation around Leeds Dynamos prior to Game Week 1 kicking off. They struggled, but I think we've got to give full credit to Muscle Warriors. It was 2 Rickenshaw finishes which led to that 2-0 victory. What Rickenshaw has, I think Rickenshaw is the perfect person to reference with regards to the shift in momentum and expectation. Obviously a quality Premiership proven player, winning many things with Aspire. Similar to Luke Kelly, dropped down a division last year to ensure minutes, to ensure his development. And he's just a great player. For anyone watching, maybe in the Premiership, if you're not getting the minutes or you're not seeing that development in your game, that know that you can drop down a division to try and get your kind of career back on track. He's not only adding goals to his game, he's pretty much key to all attacking and defensive phases of play for Muscle Warriors. And we spoke about the experience they have in Reece Mallet, and Jacob Vickers, Dylan Palmer, Shay Murray, a really bright young talent in the country. The one I want to reference particularly is Parth Gaikwad. Parth Gaikwad recently transferred from Brighton and Hove Albion in the Premiership, where he was part of a team last season which typically only fielded 3 players across 3 or 4 of the 5 weekends. But himself, Nicky Baker and James Mason, who have all since transferred out to various teams across our National League, are thriving because they've taken that experience and that adversity that they've experienced in the Premiership and now are channel it in the very best of ways into their games. And he's another player paired with Rick and Shah, which has helped that shift of expectation.
Yeah, I think both those players also bring an organisational knowledge to the play and the structure. Path, having played at Brighton for a significant period when they did play with four, with a player we mentioned earlier in terms of Matty Francis, who did a lot of the organisation and dictating where players were, and Path picked up a lot of knowledge on structure and positional play as a result of that. And so I think he brings a little bit of discipline into that muscle side. Rick and Shah, so it's now played, I think, across 3 big teams in the Aspire hub. I don't think he was too old. He's too old for the Aspire Lions side in the regional league, but he's played for years for Evergreen, Aspire, and Muscle now. So he's a player that knows the club well and knows the teams well and knows all the other players around really well. So fits in really smoothly and nicely, and started off this season looking really positive and really productive in that role. So I think they've got an excellent squad. We ought to mention Ryan O'Leary, who we haven't mentioned, is down in their squad. So they're looking solid for the season.
Absolutely. So looking down the table, so that covers Greenbank, Middlesbrough, Teesside and Muscle Warriors. We're going to probably reference this middle pack a fair bit, because between I think for most people the 1-2 will be contested between Greenbank and Middlesbrough. From 3rd down to 7th or 8th, it is really up for grabs, and any one of the teams in and around that middle pack can fight it out for automatic promotion. We can maybe later on in the podcast get on to our wider predictions for the table, but the team that I have touted to finish 3rd in the division is Villa Rockets Lions, and I had no real reference point prior to Gameweek 1 kicking off. They were obviously one of the teams present in the playoffs to secure their position in the Championship, but they really impressed me. And this is a team that has that perfect mixture of youth and experience. They recruited heavily in the summer period, bringing in Nicky Baker, Joe Kerrison, Troy Willicombe, Steve Kerrison. Add that to the players that they have, they'll have very strong aspirations for the season ahead. They started with a 1-0 win over Teesside Steel, who we've already spoken about so highly, finishing 3rd across Gameweek 1. 2-1 win over Nottingham Forest preceded that. 3-1 win over recently relegated AFC Bournemouth Warriors, and it was just a 3-0 defeat to Greenbank on the Sunday afternoon, the blemish on their record, but worth noting that it was 0-0 at half time. They were competitive for large parts of that game, and Greenbank, despite the talent they have on offer, really struggled to break them down. If either of you two got a chance to watch Villa Rockets Lions across Gameweek 1, I'd be interested to see your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the biggest notable thing is the transfers that happened over the summer, bringing in very good, very experienced players. The experience of Nicky Baker. She looks like she's transformed as well. Like this season, she looks a lot better than I've seen over recent years, and that's not a criticism. That's a big boost, because she is a good player and she always has been. She's again won things at Aspire. She's won Premier League. She's been to Europe, and everything. And she was fantastic this weekend. Troy looked a completely different player, an absolute new lease of life. I spoke to him on the Saturday after. I believe it was the Steel game, their first game, and I said he looked amazing this season. Maybe at previous teams that he was at, maybe they didn't quite use him to his full potential, and now that he's gone to Villa, they are using him to his full potential, and his game's adapted so well. I didn't see much of Joe and Steve when they were playing, but all in all, Villa Lions were fantastic. Mason, very, very strong physical player. He was amazing.
Yeah, really impressive what I've seen from Mason Hindley. And one thing I do, on the topic of Nikki Baker, congratulations to her for being one of the members in the team of the weekend, but she was also had a number of nominations to be recognised as the unsung hero of the weekend as well. A new award we've brought in to shine a light and recognise the performances of players that don't necessarily get the headlines, so to speak. So full credit to her. Just before I pass over to Alex, I will say, while we're going down the table, we're talking about Teesside Steel, Muscle Warriors, Villa Rockets, Lions, it's worth noting that all of them are currently on 9 points, and only goal difference separates the three. So we need to be talking about these very much in the same regards as Muscle Warriors, as Teesside Steel, as having a truly brilliant weekend.
Thanks, Ray. I agree on those, looking at those teams all together. Just a word on Nikki Baker. She actually resulted in my favourite stat of last season when she scored a goal for Brighton in the Premiership. That was her second Premiership goal of her career, and came 15 years after her first Premiership goal. So when we're talking about experience that they've been able to bring in, that shows you, what the experience Nikki has. Yes, Rob.
I just want to say on that topic, and I think Owen touched on it earlier, she is a perfect person to reference for anyone, irrelevant of age, irrelevant of ability, that you can continue to develop. And I don't know how many years she's competed for, but she's getting the credit now that she truly deserves. She was fantastic last season in a struggling Brighton side. But for anyone who wants someone to look at and say, kind of have a little bit of motivation to say, irrelevant of your level, you can continually grow, you continually get better, Nikki's the perfect person to do that. And full credit to her. She was absolutely fantastic this weekend, and no doubt will be key to any Villa Rockets Lions success across the 23-24 season.
Totally agree. And that being said, the amount of experience they've been able to bring in is great and has brought a level to their game. I'd also say I didn't necessarily see a cohesive game plan every time. There were sections of play where obviously good players use their experience and put together, but I think it'd be interesting to see how they develop as a team and get that coherent kind of style and identity over the course of the season, and whether or not they can come out of the situation at the moment where they've got great individuals that link together and do well, but have they got a plan that is their football? You'll see that with any format of football. If you chuck together 3, 4, 5 new players into the mix, you need to give that grace period and allow that time for them to adapt to a different system, to new teammates, to new coaching. So now, between now and Gameweek 1 is that key time. They need to knuckle down in training to ensure that they start singing off the same song sheet and get a real game plan for the following weekends in the Championship.
They have a very good regional league set up as well, I believe, around the Midlands area, so that'll really improve them. But yeah, what I will say, going back to Nikki and the experience and everything, of people dropping down to the Championship, you look at it now, and there must be at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 Premiership winners in the league now. and I've never known it like that before ever. It's revitalizing people's careers, and I think it is a fantastic league now, the Championship, and hopefully going forward it'll get better and better. But yeah, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 Premiership winners in that league alone is just fantastic.
Are you about to make a big announcement, Owen?
I'm not. No.
Transfer on the cards.
No, not yet.
Thought we had a Tour One exclusive then.
I think we're gonna sound like broken records, but I think again we have to reference the quality that the Championship has and how that level of quality between the Premiership and Championship continues to decrease. Whilst there is still a substantial gap, as there is in any format of football, it's the smallest it's ever been, and the perfect way to understand that is teams that got promoted from the Championship to the Premiership last season, Nomad Knights, Manchester United. They'll have aspirations and they will very much expect to stay in the division, and likewise with teams that drop down from the Premiership to the Championship by default will have every expectation of securing an immediate return. It was just the coming away from Gameweek One, having the pleasure of commentating on a number of games, seeing the quality firsthand. It was just brilliant. It really was good, and I cannot wait to see what the division can do. And I think a perfect gauge point for this topic is maybe the WFA Cup. If we start to see Premiership teams draw Championship teams in our National Cup competition and see how well they fare. I think Nomad Knights beat Villa Rockets last season. So if we can get more of the same, it will just further emphasise our point on that quality. But no, full credit to Villa Rockets Lions. 9 points from their opening 4 games, just that one blemish being Greenbank, who we've already spoken about so highly. So no doubt if they can get better and understand the system better, they will very much challenge for maybe automatic promotion. Failing that, most definitely the playoff position in 3rd. In 6th, finishing the weekend with 7 points from 5 games, we have West Bromwich Albion Dudley. And likewise with a number of the other teams I commentated on, they were really impressive, certainly on the Saturday. And whilst we will consider the opposition, their opening 2 games very favourable, certainly with the fullness and the context that we have now with Manchester City and Nottingham Forest fairly rooted to the bottom of the table. They opened up their weekend with a fairly emphatic 8-0 win over Manchester City before a 7-0 win over Nottingham Forest. And they're another team that continues to grow quietly. They probably weren't in anyone's thoughts with regards to title winners or automatic promotion chasers, but they have to be in the conversation now, irrelevant of the difficulties they had in follow-up results against Muscle Warriors and Norwich City. Dudley is a really exciting side, and I have to give full credit. We're going to reference individual performers who've kind of taken the spotlight, but Amy Lee Julian, a player who has really impressed me. She impressed me last season. She's done so plentiful in Gameweek One, and having a conversation with her mum at the Lee Westwood at times at the weekend, I think the real shift you've seen in her game is because her confidence is there. She's growing in confidence continually within the Championship division, and she's absolutely key to everything in attack, everything in defence. She's established a really good relationship with Laura Evans, who's now occupying as the Dudley goalkeeper following her recent transfer from St George's Knights. But to know that you've got that kind of 1-2 central pairing really allows their plethora of attacking wide players in Keane Collins, Jack Westmoreland, Amy Sherman, Jack Gorder, fairly young and in their relative infancy with regards to their Powerchair football journeys, but will only continue to get better.
Yeah, Dudley were very impressive, as a lot of the teams were, and I think the 7-0 over Forest was quite standout, because I believe it was it Villa Rockets, they only won by 2-1, so it shows that Forest are a difficult team to beat. If Villa Rockets, who we already spoke about and rated very highly, rightly so, if Villa Rocket Lions are only beating them 2-1, and we're losing at half time 1-0, then it shows that Dudley have got that quality, and maybe play a little bit of a different style to Villa Rocket Lions, but it does show that Dudley do have that quality.
I said also jump in and say that in terms of goals per game, Dudley are second highest, just behind Greenbank, and goals win games. So I think their attacking threat that they've demonstrated already over the course of the first weekend is partly due to their how coherent their play looked. They looked like they had a plan. They looked like they knew what they were doing. They looked like they had intentions, and were all on the same page. And Paul Hunt's teams generally look like that. He's good at organising them and gets them.
I was just going to talk on that point. The actual official coaches are Dave Lewis and Matt Gilbert. Paul Hunt was filling in this weekend with Dave Lewis and Matt Gilbert both being at St George's Park for the senior camp and the development camps. But I think across the West Bromwich Albion hub, they all have that understanding. Full credit to Dave Lewis.
Certainly looked like they certainly looked like they knew what they were trying to achieve, and had a fluency to them that meant their attacking threat was pretty potent at the far end. So
yeah, you know they're always going to be a well organised outfit, and now they've got that established pairing at the back. You're seeing the wide players benefit. I want to give a huge shout out to Jack Gorder, and whilst he didn't necessarily get the goals or the stats or the assists to reference, his performances and his ability in the wide areas of the pitch was exceptional. His distribution as a winger really gave me kind of vibes of Brad Bates and Dan McClellan, and he's still very young, so excited to see what him and Jack Westmoreland can do across this season, because there's that expectation now. We use that word on a number of occasions, that expectation. But that is the beauty of the division now. Most teams competing, whether you're currently at the top or the bottom, will have expectations, whether that's securing or chasing the ultimate championship crown, automatic promotion, playoff, safety, or avoiding relegation. So they were really, really impressive. And 8-0 over Man City, 7-0 over Nottingham Forest. That was followed by a 0-0 draw against Leeds Dynamos, who we'll come on to shortly. And then tough games on Sunday, 1-0 and 2-0 defeat to Muscle Warriors and Norwich City respectively. So they'll have a lot to work on in this short gap, but many positives to take ahead of it. So looking at the table now, and it's full credit to them for their placement across Gameweek One. We have Sale United, And I say that because across the 22-23 season, Sale United struggled considerably across their games. They finished 10th in a 12-team division. Only St George's Knights and Nottingham Forest finished below them. And a majority of them points were secured at that time in them games contested against St George's Knights and Nottingham Forest. I commentated on their first game against AFC Bournemouth Warriors, and I think Bournemouth have squad selection issues and player availability issues. That being said, the players that they have available have quality, and whilst they were unable to secure any points in the Premiership last season, impressed. So they probably have expectations of being in and around the mix, probably haven't got the depth to secure automatic promotion, but there's no reason why they couldn't have had aspirations for that third place playoff. Sale United really impressed me in that opening game. 0-0 it finished. And on the topic, and we're going to continually shout out particular players, their captain Jack Hassan was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, was everywhere on the court, and hopefully we can give Alex more and more work going forward, because, and I know we want to get Powerchair football to the absolute top that it can be, but with regards to stat recording, if we're ever in a position to record heat maps within Powerchair football, Jack Hassan would have been everywhere. Pair that with the depth that they have and the recent acquisitions of Thomas Pettigrew, one of 3 players within our National League structure from Scotland, and they also recruited both Shannon Smith to their team. So 4 points, I think they'll be pretty delighted with that. Irrelevant of the opposition face, they've got points on the board, which ultimately is the most important thing. And talking to a few people in and around Sale, I think their goal was the 20-point mark. I think they finished on 14 last season. So 4 points from their opening 4 games certainly keeps that average. They'll have to certainly improve a little bit more if they're to reach that target. What are your thoughts on them across the weekend, Owen?
Yeah, again, like you said, they were impressive at times. The notable one being the Man City 4-0 win. I think it shows the difference in quality that they should be further up the table, and also grabbing a goal against Greenbank is vital. Not many teams will do that this season. I think we've already spoken about Greenbank, and I don't want to keep going back to them, but they will be up there at the end of the season, come June. So to get a goal against them and keep the deficit to 2 is brilliant for Sale. I want to shout out Sam Turner, particularly. His level of disability and the way that he played was fantastic. I thought he was quick at reacting. He was on the ball, and the recent signings, Tom Pettigrew, fitted in really well. And it's good to get another Scottish player in the league. I think it's good for Scotland. I'm a keen fan of everywhere developing, and I think if Scottish players are coming to England and playing in our leagues, it'll develop them a lot, and they can take ideas from our training and the English way of football and develop it in their own special way, and sort of do things like that. Jack Hassan, fantastic, like you said, he was everywhere. If we do ever get into a position of heat maps, I think he'll be up there with the likes of Johnny Bolden in the Premier League, covering a lot of ground. Tyler Reeve for Teesside. So he's a fighting over who's going next. Will go right.
Well, Well, I will say I want to give full credit to Alex and others in and around the WFA, and both our streaming operations and the recording of stats. And one thing that we've done for the Premiership, certainly within Gameweek One, is, and I give full credit to Jeff Lewis on this, is recording assists. So the players that are creating the chances which are ultimately leading to goals being scored. And talking to a lot of players in and around Powerchair football, a lot of them take just as much, if not more, satisfaction out of creating goals than scoring them. So if the consistency is key, because it's something that our match officials aren't quite tuned into recording at the moment. But if we can do that, I think that would be a real step forward as one point on the recording of stats. But the level that we're at now, and Alex can probably talk more about our partnership with Amazon and the ability that our streams have currently and will hopefully have going forward. Hopefully, these aren't too far in the future.
So, before the recording of every podcast, Ryan says, let's not go off on too many tangents. Here we are off on some tangents, but they're my favourites. So, the assist side of things, we've had some discussions, and like I say, Jeff has come up with 3 categories for assists, which we'll be recording onto our newly built WFA Matchday Touchline system, we're calling it, for recording all our events, which is a database and software to connect to it and record all our data. So we'll be recording assists where we can. We've got all of the data for Premiership Weekend 1. We will go through the footage and get Championship Weekend 1 as well. So we'll have a complete season's worth of player assists stats. And hopefully we can then create some lovely goal contribution tables and goal assist tables, etc., that we'll be able to introduce to our live stream as well for our commentators to talk about, and the graphics side of that. With regards to the heat map, I'll touch on that very quickly. We're probably not too far away. We've got a couple of bits to do first, which is Amazon are working on for us now, which is great, which is around automatic ball tracking and therefore camera tracking without the need for camera operators. But one of the steps in that process is we have a full-size pitch view on the wall up on pitch B at the moment, 180-degree camera, which will get the whole pitch. We need to straighten it out, take off the fisheye, make it look nice. It's a 4K camera, so you get pretty decent resolution. And then from there we'll ball track, but we will have that full pitch scenario. The next thing will be getting some sort of machine learning to identify the separate players that are coming on and off. When we've chucked it into, or Powerchair footage into AI, up until now, AI hasn't been that intelligent, and therefore has identified a football, yes, but also 8 helicopters flying around the pitch. So we need to do a little bit of work on the algorithms and the machine learning side of stuff to get it to recognise a Powerchair player. And then once we've got those, I suppose, we could track them and produce heat maps. The one thing I will say about all these stats, and this is from a coaching point of view, is stats don't mean everything. So you can get a great heat map with a player all over the place, and it might be because they've had a great game, or it might be because they're always chasing play and never anywhere near it. So you need to interpret the stats and use any stats and information and feedback with your knowledge as a coach and with your knowledge as a player to interpret what's happening.
No, I will reiterate that point, and I think I touched on it when we referenced West Bromwich Albion and Dudley, how I was really impressed with Jack Gorder. Whilst I think he got a couple of goals across the weekend, it was the things that you can't quantify that really impressed me. Positional play, kind of game understanding, distribution. Likewise, a player from Middlesbrough, Carl Forster, when he was occupying in them central roles, his distribution was exceptional. Didn't necessarily lead to goals and or assists, but worth noting altogether. So, no, I would agree. But it's just really exciting, certainly with the introduction of an assist table, because I think that will be very heavily contested, just as much, if not more so, than the top goal scorer charts. But no, really exciting ahead to see where we can take this. Full credit and acknowledgement to Amazon Web Services. They've been absolutely instrumental to any and everything that we've done from in this streaming space. I want to also thank Pro My Sport and Nick Woodward, who kind of laid the foundations to everything that we have. And whilst he's on to different projects and different things now within his life, we would not have what we do without him. So no, thank you to him for that. Looking down the table now, so we've had Sale United locked on the same points, actually, all on 4 points of Sale United, Leeds Dynamos, Norwich City and AFC Bournemouth Warriors. In 8th place currently, we have Leeds Dynamos, and probably by expectations and their own standards, a disappointing weekend for them to kickstart the 23-24 campaign. It was an opening 2-0 defeat to Muscle Warriors, which we've spoken about. It was then a stalemate with West Bromwich Albion Dudley. The one win they got this weekend was very credible against Norwich City, who are always very competitive and a nice defensive unit. And then it was a 3-0 defeat to Middlesbrough. They've had the recent acquisitions of Sebastian Copeland and Jack Humphreys from their Chariot side strengthen them, but after talking to a few of their players, they kind of reiterated that they're still learning to play. We talk about that adaptation period, and whilst they've got experienced players, that experience gelling in one solid unit is another thing altogether. So, but I want to give credit to Hannah Hindley and Amelia Chadwick, and I'd love to get both of your thoughts on this. As a 1-2 pairing at the back, there's few better. Hannah Hindley occupying as Leeds Dynamo's predominant goalkeeper was just brilliant across the weekend, and I hope that speaks volumes, because they conceded 4 goals across their 4 games, and struggled in attacking areas of the pitch, but they had that stability at the back. Amelia Chadwick, one of the players within the team of the weekend, another person that needs a shout out. So if you got a chance to watch them across Gameweek 1, what were your thoughts on them, Owen?
I watched them. I was commentating on another game, but I did watch them in warm-up against Muscle Warriors, and I was frightened for the league. Because I thought how good they were going to be. I thought these looked very, very promising. They were smacking the ball, and it was accurate, and it was very, very, very good. I was expecting, like you said, I think it was a very disappointing week, and they won't be happy. However, they will bounce back. I don't doubt that for a second. They will bounce back, and in game week 2 they have got a slightly tough weekend with, again, Muscle Warriors. They've got Man City, which, they'll be looking to get a lot of goals and show sort of the country that they are capable of better, which personally I 100% think they are. Greenbank coming up, that'll be a toughie. And then Steel again, which will sort of separate the teams to see, actually, it'll be a good factor to see where both teams are with that game. I think a lot of it will come down to that game to see what the difference is, whether Dynamos are at the level that Steel are, and whether Steel are at the level that Dynamos are. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed. However, shout outs, I'd have to go for Hannah Hindley and Amelia Chadwick. Again, they were fantastic. I think Seb could have been a little bit more louder, livelier in the game, sort of creating more. But it's difficult coming into a new team when you've been at another team for so long in the Premiership. It is often difficult to play for another team. So next weekend will be tough for Leeds, but I do think that their season isn't in full flow yet, and eventually it will be.
And I think we have to really take that into consideration with regards to the recent transfers of Seb Copeland and Jack Humphreys. It is in no way a formality for a player to integrate seamlessly into a new team, irrelevant if it's within the same kind of club, going from Leeds Chariots to Leeds Dynamos. And that's why when we reference people like Luke Kelly, who just seamlessly integrate into a team's performances and results, let alone securing the player of the weekend and being one of the starting four of the team of the weekend, that speaks volumes to how good he is at a player, not just with his performances, but kind of that mental side of the game that you can just integrate without any of the kind of the baggage that comes with it. I think we have to give Leeds Dynamos that grace period, as we do with any teams that are new to a division or they're a new looking side with recent transferred players. And I think come game week 2 we will see a very impressive Leeds Dynamo side, similarly to their Chariots team in the Premiership. On paper, they struggled across game week 1 in terms of what we know them to be and the expectations that we have internally. They will both be brilliant.
I think it's difficult game week 1. I think you don't know. I mentioned about experience, and I know Alex expanded on it. If you don't have that game time, if you bring in 2 new players to your squad, that's half of your squad. So that's the equivalent of a normal, I say normal football, but able-bodied football. That's the equivalent of them bringing in 5 or 6 players and just placing them in the squad. It's going to be some teething problems, and if you've never played a match before together, it's difficult in game week 1. And then you look at the footage, and reiterating what you said, Ryan, about the footage that Alex produces and the team behind all that is fantastic for things like this, because teams like Leeds Dynamos can take away the footage, watch it back, and then completely pull it to pieces and see where they're going wrong and where they could be doing better, and then they come back game week 2 and are completely different. You know, we've seen it with Teesside last season, struggled at the start of the season and then finished 3rd at the end, because just pulling pieces of footage to pieces and then putting it together and expanding on where they can improve from game week 1. And it is difficult from in game week 1 to sort of see where you are as a team until it happens, but luckily you've got a lot of time between now and June and a couple of weekends to fix it.
Irrelevant of results, I think it's worth noting that Leeds Dynamos are currently coached by Dan Rigby, who wasn't present on the Saturday's games. So, and I think we saw that within their performances on Sunday. They looked more organised. They looked a better unit. But on that topic specifically, I'm really excited as one element of the Championship division is the amount of established Premiership players that are contributing to the Championship and the Championship's teams. So for Greenbank, one of their coaches is Marcus Harrison, obviously an England international going to Sydney for the World Cup. Looking down the table, West Bromwich Albion Dudley, which we've referenced, are coached by Dave Lewis and Matt Gilbert, one within the England senior side, one within the England development side. For Leeds Dynamos, Dan Rigby. Norwich City have Rosie Hodgson. So these are all players at the top. Yeah, I couldn't see him this weekend, but these are players at the very top of their games, competing at the highest level, both domestically and internationally. And that can only help this division, can't it, Alex?
I totally agree. Like we say, the standard of football's been going up and up and up and up, and that's the aim is always to increase the levels across the divisions and support national team is as well as winning stuff along the way and having a bit of sporting glory. But I just want to nip back to the conversation about Leeds being a new team and a new group of players. To a certain extent, they're a new group of players to each other. There's a couple of players that have moved in, and a couple of players have left. I'm going to jump on and do a little bit of my coaching theory stuff now, which is another tangent, right? So apologies. And this is going to be a little bit more about how to manage a group and talk about a team overall. There's a bit of theory originally by an academic called Tuckman, who talked about team development stages, and your team goes through development stages as it grows and does what it does, and they all rhyme. So first one is forming, second one is storming, third one is called norming, then performing, and then final one is mourning, where you split up. But it's I know we're laughing at it, but actually what it's important is the in the forming stage, you're coming together, you don't always know each other, you don't have relationships, your purposes might be a little bit unclear. Through the storming stage, there's often some conflict and a little bit of conversation about what we're doing, and eventually you come to the norming stage where you find agreement and consensus, and you get clear understanding of what you do, and then you can perform, and then you have a clear vision about what you're doing and how you go about it. Eventually a team will break up one way or another, and then you have a bit of a mourning stage where you disappear off, but it can be cyclical and then go back into a forming stage. So where you are as a team on that cycle will affect how well you are performing as a team, and I think Leeds are just at that storming and norming stage at the moment, and once they get through that and get themselves organised and get that clear vision and purpose and understanding amongst each other, they'll get performing. And this isn't a criticism of Leeds in any way, shape or form. This is just an observation of how to build and grow a team as you go. Now, most coaches will do this automatically, and most people recognise those stages, even if they didn't know they'd been organised and categorised before into those five. So that's another interesting dynamic with the World Cup coming up, is there's quite a bit of time for teams to progress through that are new and learning. Man City, Leeds Dynamos with their new squad, AFC Bournemouth to a certain extent with some new players, and Nottingham Forest with some new players as well. Has had a fairly turbulent summer. So there's quite a bit of time for these teams to move through and progress as a team to then get the best football out of themselves as well.
That's an interesting take, but I fully understand what you're saying, and when you put it and form it that way, it's a really interesting perspective, and I would most definitely agree. It's not just exclusive to Leeds Dynamos, it can be applicable to any one of the 12 teams in the Championship or Premiership for that matter. And the bit you touched on, that gap now is so key. So if we can give any advice to teams or players, really pay attention to the next 2-3 months and what you can do individually or collectively as a unit. And I think across Game Week 2, we're going to have very different conversations on these podcasts for certainly when compared to Game Week 1, individual performers, results, etc. So we will certainly see. Next up in the table, locked on the exact same record of 4 played 4, won 1, drawn 1, lost 2 with a -3 goal difference, is Norwich City. Interested to get both of your points on Norwich City, who finished 7th in the league last season. They're another side who have the quality within their team to challenge at the top. Putting that plan into practice, however, is another matter altogether, and I'm sure coaches Darren Hunter and Rosie Hodgson will probably be disappointed with their results across Game Week 1. That being said, they had a very tough weekend. They started with a 3-0 loss against Greenbank, before a very credible 0-0 draw with Middlesbrough, And when we talk about Middlesbrough and their placement in the table and their results following that 0-0 draw, Norwich will probably be the much happier of the two sides. A 2-0 defeat against Leeds Dynamos, who hugged them in the table, before a brilliant 2-0 win over West Bromwich Albion Dudley. With regards to referencing individual players, I want to talk about Mike Coleman, another player who seems to be everywhere on the court, doesn't shy away from the physical aspects of the game, and was key to their attacking success, certainly within that West Bromwich Albion Dudley game. I'm really excited with Henry Bernard, and I don't know if either of you two had the chance to watch him across Gameweek One, but I commentated on one of their games with his brother George, and the age he is, surely he's got to be considered as one of the brightest talents in the country.
I totally agree. I think they've got a few good young players there. Joe George is also not too old yet. And so they've got, along with Jack Fulcher, I think they've got a few players that have got a lot of potential, a lot of talent. And like you say, with Mike there in the middle, they've got potential. I would like to see them try and play a slightly more passing-based game at times and be a bit more ambitious with some of the things that they do. I think they've got wingers that can find some nice gaps and find good positions to take up to allow passing lanes to open up the game. And I just think if they can work their strategy to create the opportunity to pass rather than at times, I think, to progress territory first and then pass after. And so I think personally would like to see them just be a bit more expansive and ambitious on the passing side of the game.
On that topic, I would agree, because in the times where play was a little more expansive and the opposition sat off a little bit, Johan George's distribution from wide areas of the pitch was really good in locating his winger, whether that be Jack Fulcher or Henry Bernard. Utilising that asset that Johan George does so well will be key, because I would agree with your point that they don't necessarily play a passing form of football, typically a fairly low block counter-attacking football where they break and get a lot of their attacking success and goals from that. What are your thoughts on that, Owen?
Yeah, I really, really like Norwich. I like the setup that they've got there. I get on really well with the two coaches, and Darren in particular. I love how he's sort of got no ties to any disabilities in Powerchair football. However, he does it through the foundation, which, you know, is a breath of fresh air, because a lot of our players and a lot of people who are members of the sort of Powerchair football community are through either parents of players or siblings of players, so on, carers, etc. So yeah, from that point of view, I do have a lot of respect for Norwich City and Darren. I want to go back. I watched a lot of the games for Norwich. So the way that they set up with Hannah in goal, I think it sort of affected them where they were less able to play the expansive football of passing it around that both yourself and Alex mentioned. But when they placed Jeanette in goal, I felt it was more open. Yes, they might have conceded a lot more goals, or, well, not even conceded, it was just more open, and the sort of play was better to watch, I felt, when Jeanette took up the goalkeeping position. However, she hasn't had a lot of experience playing.
You took the words out of my mouth. They utilised both Jeanette Birkentow and Hannah Murgatroyd at different times throughout the weekend, and they're kind of night and day with regards to how they play the game. Hannah Murgatroyd a lot more pragmatic, defensive. You'll rarely see her leave the confinements of her her box. Jeanette Birkentow, a lot more dynamic and brave with regards to coming out. But yes, it leaves them more vulnerable in defensive passages of play. I think it's all about picking and choosing when they utilise what goalkeeper in what game. They had a tough opening weekend. Greenbank, Borough, Dynamo's Dudley is really tough. Game week 2, I'd like to see them be really brave. Considering the opposition they have, they start with AFC Bournemouth Warriors, so we will come on to them just after we talk about Norwich because they've finished just below them. That follows the game again, is followed by a game against Greenbank, who we know are going to be right up there. Then it's Sale United, Teesside Steel and Nottingham Forest. So I would assume that Norwich will have quiet aspirations of securing at least 9 points from game week 2. And just before I pass it back to you, Owen, I want to echo what you said about Darren Hunter, an incredible individual who's dedicated a lifetime to coaching and disability football, and just wanted to just shout about him and give him full praise for the contributions he makes to both football, disability football, both across the country and Norwich specifically.
Yeah, I think I said it. I did comment it actually on one of the games because I remember making that point of Darren. He was on the match before our live coverage on BT Sport of the Powerchair Football Cup final in the Disability Cup. He actually coached the CP football, I believe it was, that was also on at St George's Park the same day. I believe it was the kick-off before our little stint on the TV. But he is an outstanding person to do that. Unfortunately, they're on the losing team. But yeah, going back to Norwich, I think the results are often odd with Norwich. It's not even within the last sort of season or two. They seem to do well against the bigger sides and often let it slip a little bit against the lesser sides, which I think they have. It shows that they can do it, and we just want to see them do it a little bit more often and portray their own game instead of maybe playing off other teams and using their game. And just, I think in future I'd like to see Norwich sort of winning the games that they should win, and making that push higher up the table, even for a third place finish.
Yes. So, final 3 teams to run through quickly. Next up in 10th we have AFC Bournemouth Warriors, who secured 4 points from their opening 5 games. Being an old coach of AFC Bournemouth Warriors, guiding them to the majority of their success, what are your thoughts on game week 1, Alex, from AFC Bournemouth Warriors? And if you want to maybe expand on the coach, the team as a whole, because I know they've got difficulties with regards to selection. Certainly they did have for game week 1.
Yeah, they're down a little bit of a tough period at the moment, Old Club Bournemouth, which is a big shame for me. They've got some young players coming through that are enthusiastic, talented, and they just need a little bit of maturity, I think, some of them, to understand the game a bit more, and that will come in time, and that's part of the development process. But I think they've had player losses means that they've had to shortcut that process for some of their younger players, and that's causing some of the difficulties that they've got at the moment. But I'm pretty hopeful they're going to do okay throughout the season and progress. Jordan Hayter's working really hard with them and ably assisted by a couple of others at the moment, so they're progressing. They're still doing well, and moving forward. They've got Chris King and Ryan Skinner, who are both pretty experienced players now. Chris is probably one of the top CP players, certainly in the Championship, I would have thought, at the moment, and he's taken on that central role really well. and playing really nicely. They play some good football at times. It's just a little bit of naivety a lot of the time when they're letting in goals and doing that. They've got another starting player out at the moment, Jack. Unfortunately, he's been injured, so he's out for a little period. But I think overall they should do okay over the season. They'll come back. They've got the experience of playing in the Premiership. It wasn't the most pleasant experience for them last season, but that experience should hold them in good stead in terms of toughness and drive and desire as they go forward. So they'll get there. Shout out to Kota, who got themselves a hat-trick for Bournemouth. So he's a good young player that's coming through, and see how they can progress over the season and get to the standards they want to reach.
Yeah, a tough game week 2 for them sees them open up against Norwich before a game against Sale United, and then they play 1 and 2 Greenbank and Middlesbrough on the Sunday. So hopefully they have a full strength side for that weekend and can start to really put their plans to practice and hopefully chase the higher placements in the Championship division. Whether or not third place is attainable or higher, we will soon see, and that's the beauty of it. We've only had 1 of 5 games, 5 weekends, so still a lot of football left to be played. Next up, our penultimate team is Manchester City. As we've already mentioned, a new looking outfit for our Championship division. They secured 3 points from their opening 5 games, winning 1, losing 4. And as has already been mentioned, when I had the pleasure of commentating with Lucas Veza O'Brien, I think they had the aspirations of securing a goal in game week 1, let alone 3 points. Al, do you want to just quickly talk about Man City? Because I think it's important to temper expectations for a new-looking team in the division, not to even mention kind of how young and inexperienced their players are.
I think the coach's approach was fantastic over the weekend. They're very much managing the players in terms of making sure the experience that they have is one that helps them progress, not just from making sure they learn the tactical side of the game and take out the important elements from the games that they've played. It was more about the emotional experience that they were making sure their players had over the course of that weekend as well. And they definitely heard a couple of team talks and partial bits of team talks, and they were saying the right things and understood the difficulties and the challenges of coming into the first game weekend, having never been there before. So the players themselves, they weren't happy with we want to score a goal target. They wanted to win every game. They said that with a smile on their face, and that's lovely. That's the ambition that they have, and that's what they're there as. They want to come and compete. So it's good that they've got that attitude, but it's also great that they've got coaches that are making sure they experience the progress and the growth into the league and get the experience in the right manner, in a way that means that they're productive and move forward. So hats off to their coaches. I thought they were excellent this weekend in managing the players, and I thought the players themselves looked like they had a great time and enjoyed their football. And for their first weekend, if you said you enjoy your football and you come away having had a good time, I'd settle for that. But 3 points on top of that, absolutely phenomenal weekend for them. Really, really good.
No, full credit to them for that, and let's see what they can do going forward. They'll only continue to gain from the experience of Championship football if they can pair that with really productive, meaningful training sessions, and if they're competing regionally, we will hopefully see them get more points on the board. That's not just a one-off occurrence. They did secure them 3 points against Nottingham Forest, and what a game it was as well. 2-1 it finished to Manchester City. Apart from that, as have been mentioned, tough games against Dudley, Teesside Steel, Bournemouth and Sale United all ended in defeat. So we'll see going forward. The final team in the division to conclude our roundup and recap of Game Week 1 of the Championship, we have Nottingham Forest, who came away with no points from their opening 4 games. They started with a 7-0 defeat to Dudley, 2-1 defeat to Villa Rockets, 7-0 defeat to Greenbank before that close 2-1 defeat to Manchester City. Owen, any thoughts on Nottingham Forest on their performances firstly, or what you think that they can do to start to get some points on the board?
Forest have been struggling for a few years now, really, haven't they? They stayed in the league, but sort of, they've got some good players there. They've got a lot of quality that could potentially be higher in the league, but I think sort of they've lost out on Steve Kerrison moving to Villa Rocket Lions, who was a big part of that squad a few years ago. He wasn't there last season, he went to St George's Knights, but season before he was certainly the sort of Mr. Nottingham Forest, if you would. I think they need to sort of have a deep hard look at what they could do. I'm looking at the players that they've got on the team sheet at the minute. Jack, he's been around a few years. I'm not going to try and pronounce his second name, but they've got Luke Millington on there, but they've got a few players who sort of could do well, but it's difficult because they've been down there a few seasons in a row. So
yeah, Luke Millington wasn't present this weekend, and I think the addition of him within their side will add that little bit of defensive stability. Worth noting that Aston Walls wasn't present for the Saturday round of fixtures, arguably their most talented player, but they have depth, which hopefully will work in their advantage. They've got a fairly strong squad in terms of numbers, so it's just working away. There's a number of new players. You've already mentioned kind of how transfers out have affected their momentum. I will also mention Leighton G, who's now an established member of the Nottinghamshire PFC side in the Premiership. Very talented individual who was a real miss for Nottingham Forest. And one player to watch, certainly across the final 4 weekends, is Riley Priestley, a current member on the Regional Emergent Talent Programme delivered by the FA. It's certainly one to watch. So we'll see what they can do across the season. It's a long season to go, a lot of football left to be played, and time will tell.
I think you're right about Riley Priestley. He was getting a little bit frustrated when things weren't quite going right for the side, and I think that's a good sign for them, in that he was clearly wanting a better standard of football, wanted to have better structure and organisation at times. So that frustration, or those difficult to handle at the time, I think will help drive the team forward and progress as well. So again, lots of new faces all coming together. That bit of time to get together and gel as a team and go through the forming, storming, norming and then performing stages, as we've learnt in this podcast of Tutman's group development model, that will stand them in good stead once they get there.
Gentlemen, we've been rambling on for an hour and 45 or so minutes, so we will cut things there, but I think that serves as a really good recap for Gameweek 1. Still a lot of football left to be played. The next round of championship games falls on the 18th and 19th of November, so following that concluding, we will get together and we will talk about that in more detail, hopefully with a lot more information and context with regards to the league performances, whether that's individually or collectively, and I think we can then start predicting the season ahead. We can use both Game Week 1 and Game Week 2 to predict things going forward, so we won't give our predictions just yet. But thank you to all that have joined us. The 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast with this gap in National League football will take a different focus now. Alex and I will probably get together and look at having a more of a World Cup focus. But gentlemen, from me, that's all good. Any closing words?
It's been lovely to have you, Owen, and thank you very much, Ryan, as well.
Thank you, gentlemen.